name is Lawrence Siolungi. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm half Samoan and half Filipino.
My name is Kristen Munn. I use she, her pronouns. I identify as a Chinese Filipina.
Hello, my name is Cassandra Pangilinan. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I identify as a Pacific Islander, specifically Chamorro. I identify as Asian, Spanish, and white.
My name is Lava Alapai. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I identify as Asian. I am Hawaiian, Black, Japanese, and English.
My name is John San Nicolas. I use he, him pronouns. I identify as Pacific Islander, specifically Chamorro, the indigenous people of Guam, and Mexican, and other things that I'm not sure about.
I consider myself a musical theater artist, so I like to sing, dance, and act.
My art is a theater director.
I am a theater maker and a filmmaker.
My art is acting, mainly. Mostly theater, but lots of film too.
I am a stage manager and a fight choreographer in the Portland theater area.
My childhood was full of lots of people. I have 5 siblings. My dad has 12 siblings. My mom has 7 siblings.
My dad had 8 brothers and sisters, and all of those 8 brothers and sisters had kids, and so us cousins hung around each other a lot. I was particularly close with my dad's brothers, 3 kids.
And so we spent a lot of time at families' houses, celebrating, just hanging out on a Sunday.
I had a lot of different people who loved me and a lot of different people influencing me.
So it was full of lots of people, lots of loud people, and lots of food.
I think what's unique about growing up in Hawaii is that when we play outside, we're playing outside in like what looks like a jungle. We would call it the forest.
I grew up on Oahu in the state of Hawaii.
We would make forts out there, and we would have like rubber band guns and things like that, and like have battles and climb the coconut trees and things like that.
My childhood was filled with beach days, rainy, warm weather.
We would make a lot of movies. We made a couple of movies as kids. I was in a hip hop breakdancing group where we took cardboard to the mall and would battle in front of the Hello Kitty shop and in front of the Sanrio shop. So yeah, that's what my childhood was like.
But also a separation from the mainland that I never really felt like I was a part of the United States. For example, we would often get commercials for things like Olive Garden and Red Lobster. But there is no such restaurants on Hawaii. And I even remember like contests would happen, and it was like available in all 50 states except Alaska and Hawaii, or something like that. It always felt like we were excluded because we were so far away.
My identity comes from the Pacific Islands, and it has been a journey through my father and through my mother, through the islands. And when they came to America, they erased their identity in order to become Americans. So my identity became an American. And I didn't learn how to speak Tagalog or Samoan, but my identity is still rooted in those islands. And what I bring to the table is a culture that goes back thousands of years with generations of storytellers.
I watched a lot of TV. I watched a lot of movies. My mom, Penny, my ex-stepmother, my mom, always watched movies with me and watched TVs with me and took me to the movies and let me see whatever I wanted to see. And I really got to credit her mainly for her support for me as an artist.
I got introduced to theater um, in high school. I took a theater class and I didn't really know very much about it. And they needed somebody to stage manage the spring production. And I was like, okay, I'll try this out.
In the third grade, we went to, it was a, what is it called? Field trip. We went on a field trip to see a play called To Kill a Mockingbird.
I was introduced to theater through a Phantom of the Opera soundtrack that my sister had, and I used to steal it and put it in my Walkman. And side A was Act 1, and you flipped it over, and you'd get Act 2. And I didn't really know what they were doing, but whatever it was, I wanted to do it. And when I was little, my dream jobs were actress or dental hygienist. And guess which one I became?
I did my first small role in a school play, I think in 5th grade. And in 6th grade, my homeroom teacher was also the drama teacher, but my electives were PE and the wheel, which was included shop and like 5 other things that you rotated through. And I wasn't in drama, but whenever we read aloud in class, I was a really good reader. So my teacher encouraged me to go for drama the next year. So in 7th grade, I did drama and auditioned for this school play, Ernie's Incredible Hallucinations by Alan Ayckbourn. And I got the lead role in that. And that was pretty much it.
What I remember is like the dark crowd and the lights going out, and that in the moment when the actors were seen on stage, and I was like, wait, there's like real people up there, like that's real people. And I kind of leaned into it. And my teacher, who I ran into randomly in San Francisco right before I went to graduate school, she said she actually remembered, she was sitting next to me, and she actually remembered my reaction to the play. And so she wasn't surprised that I had gone into theater in my adult life. But that moment of like seeing real people on stage, that was like the moment I was like, oh, I can do that. You can do that. That's a thing you can do.
It came so easily to me, and I enjoyed it so much and got such a positive response from it. And it just felt right. It just felt like this is, the things that make me who I am are well utilized in this. And this feels good. So I just want to keep doing it. And I never really looked back from there.
And I started out as an actor and then went to grad school as an actor. But after being in Hollywood for a little bit, it kills your soul. So I realized that I didn't really like acting very much. So I quit acting, and then I thought, oh, what else could I do? I really enjoyed directing when I was in high school and doing that. So actually, that's where I went. I started directing instead. Yeah.
I participated in a teen acting academy program by Honolulu Theater for Youth. And that was in my junior and senior year, I believe. And just had a blast. I just had so much fun. I was an actor and I acted, we did a couple of projects. One was a scripted project and one was a devised project. And then one show we kind of came up with on our own. During the devised project, they needed, we wanted to put in a fight scene. So they needed fighters, and the fight choreographer was like, who wants to fight? And I was like, me, pick me. And I mostly did it because I was like, when am I ever gonna fight on stage ever? I'm petite, I'm a girl. I was like, nobody's ever gonna let me fight unless I ask for it. So I asked for it, and I was in the show, and we did a quarterstaff fight. Again, I had so much fun, and the fight choreographer of that show asked me how old I was because there was a stage combat workshop at University of Hawaii, and would I be interested in taking it? And I said yes. And from there, it sort of snowballed. I continued my stage combat training in alignment with going to Southern Oregon University, where I got a BFA in stage management. And yeah, from there, my first job out of undergrad was I was the assistant fight choreographer for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and I owe a great deal of my training and all of like my skills to my mentor John Topo at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and Chris Duvall, who was an actor at that time, who took me under his wing, and he let me assist on a bunch of shows, and it was incredible. And for majority of my life, I have been both. I've been a stage manager and a fight choreographer.
The experiences I have are two-pronged. One that privileges me and advantages me because of my look. I can fit into a lot of roles that are brown or ethnic looking in the theatrical and film industrial complex. But it also conversely disadvantages me if I want to get funding, tell a story, make a movie about Pacific Islanders or anything that has to do with my culture. But on occasion, theaters have taken chances with me to be a leading man in a play, and those are few, but it's also a good thing. It's progress.
I think my origin story really begins at the exit of high school. I was doing musical theater. Little known fact about me is that musical theater is actually my thing. I love it. But doing that, and then I went, but my mom said I couldn't go. I have typical Asian parents, and that I had to do something useful with my life, and so theater wasn't it. So I told my mom that I was going to go be a doctor, and so she's like, okay, great. She's going to pay for school and blah blah. I got there. I went to a school in the East Coast, and I got there as I was one of three women in this program that it was an accelerated medical program. Some Asian stereotypes hold true. I was good at school, but we can go there, and I was one of three women in that program, and then the only person of color in that program, and I learned very quickly that when you look like me, going to a school in the deep South probably wasn't a good idea. But I didn't know that. You come from Hawaii. We're all brown of some sort. Even the white people are brown because of the sun. But it's a different growing up experience. And so when I went to the East Coast to go to school, first as pre-med medical student, they treated me like I was nothing, like I didn't know anything about anything. And I don't know that they were surprised that I was in the program at all. Meanwhile, I wanted to be in theater anyway, and would often kind of sneak away to the theater department just to check out what they were doing. And I auditioned for a play. Without my mother's permission. I just, you're in college, then you don't need permission slips anymore. So I auditioned for a show in that theater department, and I was the only person of color that auditioned in any way, shape, or form. But I got the leading role meant for a man. They changed the role gender for me, and they cast me in that role. And that's kind of my origin story. I kind of was supposed to be a doctor and then uh, went and got cast in a play.
I went to school at Southern Oregon University, and what I decided to do during my time there is anytime that I had a break and I had money, I would take a stage combat workshop. So, spring break, fall break, winter break. I would fly all over the country. I've trained in Florida, I've trained in Las Vegas, I've trained in Illinois. So anywhere that they had a training program, I would take and then up my certification. So while I was going through school, every year I took a new certification class. I would save up for it and then I would take it. And it would be an intensive 2-week program. And I went from beginning to intermediate to advanced certification. And in the summer of when I finished my undergrad degree. And that summer, I took a teaching certification workshop and for theatrical combat. So by the time I graduated, I had my teaching certification and I had my undergraduate degree. And that's when I got hired on as the assistant fight choreographer for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
I did a lot of theater in high school, and but there was a flyer on the wall in my drama class for Images, Theater for Young Hearts and Minds, which was a program run by the Planned Parenthood of San Diego and Riverside counties. And so I auditioned for that and got cast, and we got like a $200 monthly stipend, which was a big deal for me at the time. And we got a lot of training and education from the folks at Planned Parenthood, and then we wrote our own material, short scenes, vignettes about whatever issues were affecting teens at the time. Sex and drugs and graffiti and so many things. And I talked about sex, even though I was completely ignorant about it. And I got a lot of really high quality training and positive feedback from that program. The Andrea Singer, who was the director of that program at the time, I auditioned for one college, AMDA, the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York City. If I didn't get in there, I was going to go to Merrick College of Medical and Dental Careers in San Diego. I already filled out the financial aid paperwork and everything. Andrea Singer helped me prepare my audition pieces for AMDA, but had no clue how to do that. I picked these crappy monologues from some monologue book that were like not the right type or age for me at all. I just picked them because I enjoyed them. They were fun for me. And, she worked with me, and despite my complaining, we polished those monologues, and luckily I got into AMDA.
My first experience in theater was a middle school show where I got to play this really loud diva with one number at the end of Act 1, and I got to come stomping on and push someone out of the way. And I liked it, and I ended up auditioning for theater camp because all my friends were in theater camp. And then I just kept auditioning for things, and I ended up auditioning for the community theater just a little bit outside of my town. And even past high school, I just kept auditioning for shows at this community theater. And then I was auditioning for shows professionally, and then I was auditioning for shows in Portland and commuting. And so I just kept doing it. I found this love of theater that I couldn't really identify. And I just kept auditioning, kept doing shows. And I still am auditioning and still doing shows even now.
I feel really blessed because I had really good mentors. My mentors were so good to me. They sent me jobs, they sent me gigs, they brought me in as their assistant. The reason why the first job I got out of undergrad was the assistant fight choreographer at OSF is because I had interned there the year prior, and John Topo, who I consider one of my mentors, he enjoyed working with me. He advocated for me, and it happened to be a very fight heavy year. They were doing Hamlet, they did Ruined, they did Henry IV Part 1, and so there was a lot of fights in the season. So it made sense for me to be there. When that season was coming to a close, I realized that my mentors were so great and so good to me that I didn't really know how to get my own job. So I decided to move away and try and figure this out on my own.
I would love to play Mimi in Rent again. I've played it already a few years ago now, about almost 6 years ago at this point, and I really love this part because it's one of the few roles that's written for an actress of color, and I find it to be, at least from my perspective, incredibly nuanced and complex. The songs that she gets to sing are really out of the ordinary for actresses of color. She gets to like propel the story forward and gets to have these really emotional, vulnerable moments. So I would love to see what I could do with that part, 6 years later with a different cast, with a different director, and see where I could take it and see where it could go.
The dream role question has always been a weird one for me because there are so many roles that I want to play. I kind of want to play all of them. And there are, certain plays that I like to do and roles that I like to do in those plays. But I don't want to mention them because if I mention them, maybe you'll do it instead of me. And I have FOMO about that. Mainly my real dream projects are working on new things and making new things. So I'm kind of trying to work on those dream projects of my own.
I'm not sure because I've been very blessed in that I've been able to do a lot of things that I've been wanting to do. And it's just kind of been a natural progression for me. But I guess the one thing that I've been wanting to do that hopefully I'll be able to do is and I don't even know why, but it's hair. I want to do hair really badly, and I don't know why. Like it was like a soundtrack to my teenage life, but I think that's probably why. But yeah, the dream project would be to do hair.
Ever since the publication of She Kills Monsters by Chi Nguyen, it has been the absolute joy of my life to choreograph that show. I have done it 4 times now, and I've done it at 3 high schools. Sorry, 2 high schools and 2 colleges and universities. And every single time I've done it, it just brings me so much joy. If I was thinking about this the last time I choreographed it and I was watching it, if I were to have a role in that project, I would probably want to play Farah the Fairy and just have a humongous epic battle scene for that particular scene. I love this show so much. It's just everything. It's it centers women, it centers queer women. It is about grief, love, family, sisters. It's about um like loving every part of who you are and accepting every part of who you are and loving every part of who your family is. And it's depths.
I guess that I am tender and sweet and gentle and kind and loving and silly. And, you know, so much about acting is about the type. What do people see when you walk into a room? And judging by the roles that I get, I think a lot of people see, I tend to, play a lot of toxic masculine types, aggressive, dangerous, bad guys, and that's not me at all. And I think, theater tends to attract the gentler side of the population. And so maybe I'm not on the gentle side of those people. So, I'm like I'm like the masculine guy in theater, which is, I'm not very masculine, but compared to, I guess, what people are used to seeing in theater, I frequently play these just like male characters. So, which is fine. That's in me, but there are other things in me as well, and I'd like to be seen more for those things and be considered more. Because that's like, to do something different than what people expect of you is kind of always what I would like to do.
I have recently taken ownership of the title Pacific Islander. As a Chinese Filipina who grew up in Hawaii, it was really hard for me to know where I belonged. My family immigrated to Hawaii under circumstances that were not desirable and not pretty. And so both sides of my family in their own way don't have any connection to like our home country, but we all have a deep connection with the island of Hawaii. And we know and acknowledge our place as visitors there, as immigrants there, but it is also very much our home. My Filipino side, even I was been talking to my mom, and my mom doesn't really have a she doesn't really have a deep drive to go back to the Philippines because it was so hurtful to our family and to that side of my family that Hawaii is our home. Hawaii is where she was born, she was raised, she raised her kids, she thrived. And so, for what I would like people to know is that just because you're mixed doesn't mean you don't belong. And knowing yourself and knowing who you are is the most important thing that you can do for yourself.
I grew up in Hawaii, and the two identities I am most culturally ingrained with would be the Hawaiian culture and the Japanese culture. My grandfather's Hawaiian and my grandmother's Japanese, and they raised me. So in that household, it was those two cultures in there. And what's difficult is that I don't look Asian, like externally, I do not look Asian. I definitely look Black. And when it comes to storytelling, I truly believe that the first person to be telling those stories are people of those cultures and those ethnicities and those races should be telling those stories. So the difficulty comes in when I want to tell Asian stories because I don't look Asian, but I am, and that's where I'm from. And those stories are ingrained in me in ways that I can't pull apart that from what I look like, if that makes any sense. And so when I'm approached to do these stories, a lot of times I feel like, oh, maybe it should go to somebody, or it should be somebody that externally and internally, has that. And it's been something that I've been trying to work on, because I understand and hear that it is mine to tell. It is my story to tell.
Something I would like people to know is that my identity is really important to me. It's something that I hold really dear and close to my heart. There's something called Chamorro pride that a lot of, I think, islanders have in common. This pride and strength in who we are and our culture. So I think that's something that I would love for people to know from the get go, that my identity is really important to me. I think something I experience that other people don't get to experience is I get a lot of guesses, and usually wrong guesses, about what my ethnicity is. I will have people who are strangers come up to me and speak in a different language that I don't speak. And this used to happen almost daily. I don't go as many places anymore, but I used to have this happen at least once a day. And I feel like that is completely related to the way I look. I don't feel like everybody experiences this.
I have been told that I am ethnically ambiguous. I've been told that I look exotic. I have been told these things because people don't always know um my ethnicity. Uh it's tough because I identify as Asian and Pacific Islander. I'm Chinese and Filipina. And it's tough because a lot of times I don't feel Asian enough for my Asian side. And I don't always feel Pacific Islander enough for my Pacific Islander side. And it's even recently that I have started to claim the Pacific Islander title. And truly, the reason why I started claiming it is because I started to learn more about the Philippines, about the Filipino people, and about the way they contributed to the um, landscape of exploration across our oceans. And that really allowed me to take ownership of that title and to claim that I am Pacific Islander. But it's tough because there's not because I haven't had opportunities to see many forms of my story. I often have to reaffirm myself or reconnect myself with my own culture to feel like my whole self, because sometimes I don't feel Asian enough, sometimes I don't feel Pacific Islander enough. But I am these things, and I know that I am these things. And so there's not a lot of those visual cues out there for me. So I have to create it for myself, and I have to cultivate my own home and surround myself with affirmations of who I am.
People don't know what to do with me. I mentioned earlier about how in acting, so much of casting is based on what you look like when you walk into a room before you even say anything or do anything. And race is a big factor. If race is important in a character, usually people want someone who, when they walk in, you see that race immediately. So if the part is for a Mexican, I might walk into a room and some people might think, yeah, he might be Mexican. But I don't walk into a room and people are like, oh, look at that Mexican guy, right? So I don't get the Mexican guy part. I've never seen a play with a Chamorro part, but if there was a part that called for a Chamorro, I wouldn't walk in the room and they say, that's the guy, because I don't look like a stereotypical idea of what a Chamorro looks like. You know, I'm white too. That's part of my identity and my racial background. But if being white is important to the story, people are looking to cast someone who, when they walk into the room, oh, look at that white guy, like somebody that is iconically white, and I'm not that. It's extremely frustrating in a world that is obsessed with racial identity to have the physical appearance of someone who has a vague racial identity.
Doing the Chinese lady at ART, a lot of it was, I was nervous because, you know, will they see that seeing me as the director for a show like that, which is a very Asian immigrant story, you know, what will happen to me? And then the other side of it is like the connection to the Pacific Islander community, because that is also mine. And it's a part of my journey that I'm still discovering as I go along. You grew up in Hawaii, and it's kind of taken for granted, especially in my family. In my, my grandfather, you just know, and you grow up just kind of not really thinking about it. And the first time I really thought about what that identity means is potentially going to Kamehameha as a school. I went there to interview, and you have to like show that you have to be a certain amount of Hawaiian to go there, and blah blah. And I took I was slated to go there. I was supposed to go there, but at the time I didn't want to leave my friends, so I didn't go. Looking back, I regret that because I think had I gone there, I would have learned a lot more about my Pacific Islander, my Hawaiian identity that I am very proud of. So in those two areas, which I don't present externally, those two areas I feel like imposter syndrome. So it's things that I struggle with.
I connect to the Pacific Islands because that's where my family is from. My dad is from Saipan, which is an island in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And that's where a ton of my family is from, where they still live. I have a lot of family who are descended from people from Saipan, and so that's how I connect. That's where I'm from. That's where my family's from.
It's hard to out here in this place. But I will say, every time I go home, and I don't go home very often to Hawaii, but every time I go home, I have to touch the ocean, and touching the ocean at home really connects me to the land, to the Aina, and that's one thing that the Hawaiians, well, most Pacific Islander and indigenous communities really impress on me, is that that the love and the respect for your land and the land around you is something that leaves such a deep impression on me. So every time I go home, I'll touch the ocean. And every New Year's Day, I have a tradition of going to the ocean just to touch it, because I know the other side of that is both of my homelands, Japan and Hawaii. So on the other side of it is who I am.
As a Filipino person, as a Filipina, it's really only recently that I have allowed myself to claim that title of Pacific Islander, because the Philippines have been conquered so much in the past. We have such a diverse group of Filipinos. You can put two different Filipinos next to each other, and they can look very different from each other. And it's interesting. It's just I have recently claimed that part of my identity. And I also am born and raised on the island of Oahu in the state of Hawaii. Um, the Hawaiian Islands is my home. It is my place of refuge. It is my ohana. Um, it's where I became me. It's where I learn the most about myself. It's where, if I feel lost, I go back to. It's my grounding place. It's just, it's just everything. My ancestors are buried there. My great grandparents are buried there. My grandparents are buried there. My history is there. My lineage is there. And um, because of that, I also was very, very fortunate that when I was going to school in Hawaii, I learned Hawaiian studies. So I learned about the Hawaiian people, Hawaiian history. Especially what sticks out the most to me is the way that the Hawaiians used the land. When you grow up on an island, you realize how fragile the ecosystem is there. That if one invasive species gets out, it affects everything and everybody. Um, I I remember there was when I was a kid, I think I was in middle school, there was a green algae that broke out, and within a matter of days, there was a river that I passed by almost every day to go to school, and it was just like green. It was so weird, and it was very jarring. It was very scary because it really affected the life around that river. It affected us, and even just seeing it every day choked up like that was unsettling. It was unsettling. So my connection to the Pacific Islands is being born and raised on the island of Hawaii, and just really truly acknowledging that connection with land. When you grow up on an island, you notice when the earth changes. You notice when things feel off.
Actually, I don't connect to the Pacific Island community. I've been raised in an environment where that was discouraged. So the way I connect is just through my own research and also meeting other Pacific Islanders, but not artists. Because I live in Portland, it's hard difficult to find people of Pacific Island origin. We're very separate in a lot of ways, so I don't connect to them in that way, but I do connect to the spiritual aspect of their history, and I show up in my skin as a Pacific Island artist, and I will continue to explore that in this journey of digging deep into my identity and finding out what that means.
Unfortunately, I think my connection to the Pacific Islander community is largely superficial. Growing up, there was pride in my family, Chamorro pride. People had, Guam t-shirts and jackets and little posters on the wall and banners. Um, but we really didn't learn a lot specifically about our heritage, or I didn't. Guam is an American military base largely, and it's, colonialized heavily. The culture is largely Catholic and conservative, which are things I don't particularly connect to. I have some connection to the food, even though that's pretty Americanized, colonialized as well. Things like Kelliquin they would have on special occasions, and are also borrowed from other cultures, lumpia and pancit, and mainly for me though, it's just the meat and rice with every meal, and with soy sauce, and a lot of the meat cooked with soy sauce. Yummy food.
Food. Through food. We connect through food. So we never had, we don't really you don't really celebrate Thanksgiving in that way. We don't have turkey. We have Kahlua pig and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I connect through food.
I have many favorites, but when I was growing up, I was in a Hawaiian review, Hawaiian and Samoan review, and I played the drums, I played the keyboard, my father played the guitar, his wife at the time sang. I grew up with a lot of songs from Hawaii, from all Polynesia, and those are the things that I remember the most. Now, ask me if I understand what they're saying. I don't. So I just listen to the songs and I can sing them phonetically.
Okay, along with honoring land, one of the things that's very true about the island of Hawaii, or the Hawaiian Islands, I should say, is that spirits are very present, very present. It is just known, it is like a well-known fact that we share the space with another realm. We share it with the gods, with the spirits, with the ancestors. There are many, many stories about Pele, the goddess of fire, of the volcano, and she is very often on the Big Island. Stories about her getting into cars with people and showing them how to go the right way, or turning people around so that they don't go to like sacred spaces and sacred areas. When I was a kid, there was this pass that kind of went through the mountains, went through the valleys, and there is no explanation why, but we just would not drive on it at midnight because we knew it was haunted. There was no we didn't do any investigating. We don't know why, but we know that weird things would happen at midnight through that pass, and it was scary and maybe a little dangerous. So we just never drove through that pass at midnight.
I think my favorite Pacific Islander story is the story of the Tatamona. So Tatamona is like the people who came first, but it's not just like ancestors or people who came first. There was this legend of these spirits and kind of helpers who would assist you in the daily trials and tribulations of your everyday life. And then there were the antithetical spirits who would kind of trick you and were malevolent. And the way that my understanding of Tatamona now is that it's this kind of force and this kind of togetherness that we as a community feel within the Tatamona. And so that's one of my favorite kind of Chamorro stories and folktales.
The story of King Kamehameha, that story is famed in how we unified those islands. And I don't know how many greats it is, but in my family, my last name is Alapai, and it is the name of the king prior to Kamehameha. And he and it was it's a great story, and it was told to me by my grandfather. So he said that and I don't even know if it's true, so I just take it with a grain of salt, is that King Alapai heard of a prophecy that there would be a male child that would come and overthrow his government and unify the island. So he ordered that child to be killed, very much like Greek stories, right? So he did that, and then the young king, the King Kamehameha, was actually removed and was hidden until the time came for him to be king, and unify the story and unify the islands of Hawaii, and ultimately kill King Alapai, my ancestor. And I can't remember if King Alapai is Kamehameha's uncle or whoever it was, but it was very Oedipal in the story. It sounded like Oedipus. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So that's one of my favorite stories, and I don't even care if it's true or not, but it's because it's a cool story. But yeah.
There's a very famous highway called H3, and we don't bring pork on that highway, or if we do, we put some out as an offering for the ancestors, because it has been said that your car will break down, and you do not want your car to break down on the H3. It is busy, it is far. You would have to walk so far to like get to the next town. So why even chance it, right?
Growing up, we often heard about the little Menehunis on the islands, and I don't even know how to explain it because I've forgotten it, but they're kind of like Hawaiian elves, or they're mischievous spirits and characters that occupy the islands.
And then, of course, the scariest and the maybe the more famous ghost story of the Hawaiian Islands is the Night Marchers. Okay, this is my story. This is what I know of the Night Marchers. For me, how it was told to me is the story goes, King Kamehameha, when he was uniting all of the Hawaiian Islands, was on Oahu, one of the final islands to bring into the island chain and to connect together. And there were soldiers at the top of Diamond Head, I think. And he said, you can jump or you can join me. And they jumped. And so from there, they march across the island, and their souls are locked into the island forever to protect it, forever to be on the march, forever to just go around the island. And their spirits are constantly just patrolling. And so the story is that when you hear like a steady drum beat, right, you just put your head down and you don't look up, and you don't look up until the drum beat fades away.
You don't look at them in the eye. Oh my gosh, I do have a story about those night walkers. There is a lookout in Hawaii where all the kids will go at night and probably look out, and they will go make out, whatever. It's like one of those places. One night we went, and back in the day, you could ride. I mean, I think you still can in Hawaii. You could ride on the back of the truck without any restraint or whatever. So we did that. We went up to there, and my friends turned off the headlights, and we're driving up this mountain. We parked. We're what we call a talk story, and all of a sudden, we like turn and we see these blood red eyeballs. I kid you not, we all saw them at the same time. We screamed and we turned the truck on and we bolted down the mountain. Don't know what that was, but yeah, it's totally true.
I remember one night I heard like a doom, doom, doom. And I was so scared. I was like, oh my God, the Night Marchers are coming. And I hid underneath my covers and I closed my eyes and I just like waited until it passed, and I waited until it went away. And then the next morning at breakfast, I was like, did anybody else hear that drumming last night? And my siblings didn't because they were fast asleep. But my dad said, oh, I think that like they were doing like practice cannon fire or something like that. Like there was like maybe an event coming up like 4th of July. So they were like doing practice stuff. But I remember that so distinctly. And I remember being so scared. But also, this is to say that I also know that their spirits are there marching on the island, protecting the island. And I knew the solution to have my soul not taken, which is to cover my eyes and not look up, and they would go away. So right, that's the kind of ghost you want, is the kind of ghost that will go away and you know what to do.
There's a film called The Orator, and it is about a Samoan village, and it tells about the rich history of oration, of Samoans communicating at a high level amongst the chiefs, and they stand there with their staff, and they speak this high language, and they make decisions over each village. The other film that I do like is The Whale Rider. It is about the Maori culture, but it is also about how tradition is disappearing from the island. So, Whale Rider, The Orator.
Taika Waititi. I'll go see anything by him, anything at all. Hunt for the Wilder People. It's fantastic. The young Maori actor in that is pretty fantastic. Julian Dennison. Israel Kamakawiwo'ole, the guy who did the famous cover of Somewhere Over the Rainbow that we've heard of a bazillion times. Troy Polamalu and his shampoo commercials. Former Pittsburgh Steelers safety. I'd like to find more.
But I do love the songs of Pacific Islands, and that's something that I grew up with and still listen to this day.